Hey everybody, this is my 40-gallon Waterfall tank, and the other day I put that big temple plant you can see right there in the middle. I also added some Ludwigia, that's that sort of bright green plant you can see in the back directly underneath the waterfall. I also added the couple little shoots right here. This is also temple plant. I've also added a few pieces of the Ludwigia in the waterfall itself. You can see some of it is tucked in right here and is growing down, and we've actually got some sort of upwards growth right there. And up here we've got a little bit coming out of here. This is a fairly deep basin of water, and I actually have a planter with some potting soil and some gravel up here. And all of this is planted in that, and it's just flowing this way. So I do have some that's now coming up and over, and I've got this that's actually starting to turn up and grow towards the light as well. So it's doing really well, and it's growing nice and vigorously. I've also got this daylily back here, that sort of spiky plant, that is growing using the water within the waterfall itself. This viney looking material up here, this plant here, is dead nettles, and that is actually in a planter. Likewise with this great big bleeding heart and the stuff you see around the periphery here, these are all in planters, so that's not actually consuming any nutrients out of the waterfall itself. These do. The water runs down, a little bit runs through here, and that's how these get watered. So those plants back there also draw nutrients out of the water. And the reason I'm talking about all this is because I recently talked about putting some terrestrial based general purpose fertilizer in here because I have such low nitrogen compounds in here. I did a test this morning, and this is after several days since my last water change, but I did top the tank off this morning, and I've now got that much nitrates. So that's under 5 parts per million. And right now I've got this much in my tap water, so that's the only reason we're even seeing this much, is because I just added tap water to it this morning. We generally sit at just enough nitrates in this tank that it registers, but it's well below 5 parts per million. So my idea was that if I used a terrestrial-based fertilizer, I would use it in very low dosages, and I was going to look into how to use it and so on and so forth before I just went and started putting, Miracle-Gro in the tank or whatever. My chief concern was that the fertilizer I use is a really good high-quality fertilizer, and it has all of the trace nutrients in it. So if you get Miracle-Gro, it's just 15, 15, 15. But if you get Jack's All-Purpose, not only is it 20, 20, 20, but you also get the whole complement of trace minerals to go with it. And when I checked, I found what I was looking for on this, and that is copper. Most trace element plant foods will contain copper, and I don't know about the amount of it. It didn't look like very much, but at the same time, it doesn't take very much when it comes to copper. Copper accumulates in your tank if you are using it, and it will prevent any inverts like mollusks, snails, for example, that I have in this tank, shrimp, anything like that would not be able to live in a tank that's been treated with copper. So the Jack's All-Purpose is sort of off the list because of the amount of copper, and it's got 0.1%. But honestly, I don't really need the trace nutrients because I have this, which is trace nutrients, and this is designed for our aquarium. And when you look at the copper on this, it does indeed have it, but it's got 0.0001%. It's got 1,000 times less copper in it than my Jack's all-purpose fertilizer. So that brings me back to, I don't need trace nutrients. All I really need is nitrogen and probably phosphate and potassium, the typical NPK. So in this case, the low budget Miracle-Gro, which is just the NPK and no other trace nutrients, would actually probably work for my purposes, but I don't have any of that, so I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to get a source of nitrogen for the tank. I thought about this idea. I'm going to throw this out there, see how bad of an idea this actually is. This is water from my snail tank, which I basically never change. So that's not insane, but we're probably at 60 or 80 parts per million nitrates there. That's pretty red. So what I thought about doing was taking the water out of that tank. I can put it in a pot on the stove and just bring it up to a simmer. And while I honestly don't even think that would be necessary, it would sterilize the water. It wouldn't have any impact on the nitrogen compounds in there. The nitrates would still be just fine, but it would kill off any kind of parasites or any unwanted eggs or anything that might possibly be in my snail tank. And then I could just let that water cool and add it to this tank, just simply to add the nitrates to the tank. So I think that would work. I just wonder if it's necessary, because, you know, there is some nitrates in the water. And if there's some nitrates in the water, that means the plants are using up what they need, and there's some left over. If there was no nitrates in the water, then you could say, okay, well, the plants are using all the available nitrates, and they're just, you know, they may need more. They may have just the right amount, and they're just using it up perfectly. Or they may be nitrogen starved. They may need more if there's no nitrogen in your, you know, water. If you test your water and there's no nitrates at all. So in my case, I still do have some nitrates. It's very low. It's under 5 parts per million. But there are nitrates available for the plants. So I think for now, I'm going to just leave it alone and not do anything with it. I gave it a really big dose of the trace minerals the other day from that flourish. I wound up putting way more in there than I should have. It's not going to hurt anything, but at the same time, I don't need to add any kind of nutrients to the plants just now anyway. For one thing, they're all going to be adjusting to a lot more light than they used to be under, and there's no need to slam them with a bunch of fertilizer at the same time I'm doing that. Let's let them get adjusted and settle in before I worry about getting them well fed. And let's see if they need it. Again, everything seems to be growing just fine. I do have some nitrates available for them. So, there you go. We'll go ahead and give it a test run and see how it goes from there. But I did want to make it clear that I'm not going to use that terrestrial-based Jack's fertilizer, as good as that is for your houseplants, because it does have 0.1% copper in it. So keep that in mind. Don't know what else I've got to say about this tank. I have been in here kind of looking at it, tinkering around. I changed the filter. I topped the water off, as I said. And, of course, just looking at my plant growth, it's just growing out of control. This stone crop here is already, rooted in and growing. And that, I literally just sprinkled some cut pieces of it on the surface several days ago. And, of course, you can see how tall my columbine's getting. This bleeding heart is just going insane. And I've been saying since day one that that's going to go insane. It's going to be out to here by the time it's done, at least. So we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. My daylilies are also shooting up. They're going to be topping out as far as their foliage here pretty soon. And I suspect it won't be too long before we start seeing the plant spikes start coming up. And then, of course, my geraniums and Rex begonia and everything over here is still doing good, although that's an odd angle to be looking at them. But when you walk around the tank a little bit like this, you get much more of that three-dimensional effect. You really get an idea of how much depth there actually is to this whole setup. So it's starting to fill in nicely. It's starting to look like summertime again, and since my yard is about the limit of where I'm going to get to be able to enjoy the summertime, and believe me, I don't take that for granted. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't even have that. Compared to what a lot of people have to go outside and enjoy. My yard may as well be a city park. So I also have this, and hopefully it will grow in nicely and give us all something to enjoy as the spring progresses. So stay in, stay safe, make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget, this one here is my 40-gallon waterfall tank. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.